after spending a career in programmatic, I can say I've left, so as blasphemous as I might be, but mainly because I was tired of not making money in mobile. And I'm going to talk a little bit today about why we're not making money in mobile, and I think actually the last panel did a pretty good job of touching on a lot of those concepts. But programmatic does not work well when there's a lot of fragmentation, when there's a lot of walled gardens, and quite frankly, when there's like crappy mobile web resolutions that don't necessarily make a lot of sense. So I'm going to chat a little bit today about what those challenges look like. So first thing is, I think we take for granted in programmatic as we think of things in a very desktop, mobile web landscape. Mobile is hyper fragmented. So both in terms of multiple applications, multiple mobile websites, but even beyond that, now publishers syndicating their content in Apple News, which is different. There's Facebook-related articles. There's Snapchat, which has totally separate content feeds. Now that content is living in so many different places, the problem we have even beyond that is how do I start to discover content? How do I start to discover related actions that I'm interested in doing as a user? So fragmentation is terrible for us in the room. Fragmentation is great when you are a major platform. So you can kind of see just in terms of this general informational graph that it is not a surprise that the top apps in the App Store are actually controlled by obviously the biggest platforms. This is great. So people often talk about in mobile, there's a small subset of apps that people are actually using on their phone, which is correct. Those apps are obviously controlled by a number of these platform leaders, which is in their benefit. And from there, they can then start to control how users go out and actually discover other sets of content. So with this, we've got very fragmented content and information. Users really just focus on a small handful of applications that they're continuously going back to. And basically, a lot of these platform companies being the navigation layer or the discovery layer for anything that you might want to do as a user. So I'll kind of go through the three basic concepts in terms of how Apple, Google, and Facebook in particular are capitalizing, I would say, on this opportunity, and then we can go into a little bit of the details in terms of what we can do about it. So Apple, obviously, with Spotlight, is taking a very straightforward, search-based approach in terms of helping users find content, other related actions they might want to do next. Google's taking probably, obviously, a much more advanced approach to that, just given a lot of the assets that they have to date, around more predictive assistance. So Google Now's product then takes into account search history, email data, calendar information, et cetera, to say, hey, Lauren, I know that you're interested, or you're going to go meet up with a friend for lunch somewhere. Why don't I make sure I get you a ride there, or help you book a reservation, et cetera. So they're predicting the next, basically, actions that you're looking to do on your phone. And then Facebook is taking another approach, which is with their M product, to say, how do we start to interject ourselves within a lot of these conversations where people are talking about what they want to do next to make sure that we're adding that recommendation layer of let me be of assistance to you in terms of connecting the dots of what you might want to do on your mobile device. So what this means for us, obviously as an industry and as a room, is if a lot of the content and commerce events that people are looking to take remain fragmented, and there isn't really an effective way to discover content, because let's be honest, the App Store is like the worst thing ever constructed, makes absolutely no sense. And you've got the major platform players sort of being our navigation layer, that very much handcuffs advertisers and publishers. And I think from like an ad tech industry perspective, creates obviously a lot of reliance on those companies. So what is deep linking? Actually, raise of hands, how many people have heard of deep linking before and know what it is? That's better than I thought? Okay, cool. So it's like the most rudimentary concept when you think about it, which is if I, as a user, have an application on my phone, why not resolve me to that piece of content within the application, which is great for the publisher, right? There's a much richer data set that they're going to get from the application. As a consumer, it's great too, because oftentimes you've got my credit card information on file. You've got a lot more information for me to actually take action much more quickly. And all a deep link is basically to say apps were originally constructed to just resolve users to the home page. So if I'm interested in Spotify, for example, I would just kind of go to Spotify's main page. As opposed to saying, like, I don't just want to go to Spotify. I want to specifically listen to this song by Drake and go directly to that actual article page. So really, deep linking has only occurred in the past year and a half, I would say, in mobile, where now publishers are exposing these deep linking structures and saying, hey, if people do have the app on their device, why not resolve them to that optimal app experience as opposed to just dumping them into a mobile web or into the actual app store itself? So the main thing that this is, I'd say, unlocked in particular for mobile today is commerce. Commerce is something that honestly is not very well addressed in mobile. We can talk about a myriad of different reasons as to why it's not well addressed. And I think particularly for the publishers that we talked about on the panel even, without unlocking a lot of this commerce demand, we're going to continue to propagate this like gaming, install, really just crappy ad ecosystem, quite frankly. And how do we start to make sure that we're bringing more commerce into the fold and actually helping users take action? So with that, you can just see, as a retailer today, it's very, very difficult for them to capitalize on a lot of that viewership and make sure that they're resolving people appropriately. There's a few different approaches in terms of what you can do here. So as we joked about earlier, I think like Facebook being the de facto option for mobile, I don't care how much data you have, how great it is, Facebook will always have better data. So from a retargeting perspective, audience-based perspective, in mobile in particular, they will continue to eat at a lot of that market share. Now the question is, what are other things that we can do in the audience to sort of capitalize on a lot of the spend that's moving into mobile and make it perform just as well? The second thing, obviously, that you're kind of seeing here with this image too is Facebook obviously operates in a very walled ecosystem. If you sit on the publisher side of the equation, it's very difficult to monetize this. There's plenty of rules in terms of how they can behave. Content within Snapchat, like a lot of rules, like there's not effective monetization there today. Even Apple News, you're very much relying on iAd as basically your monetization source, which is also not very optimal. So what's happening is with this walled ecosystem, publishers are having a hard time controlling the information that's there and making money effectively. And obviously, Facebook reaps a lot of the benefits, particularly from a retargeting perspective, to make sure that they're resolving all of those users and continuing to eat at more of that budget. So the problem with it is, which I think John talked a little bit about from Grapeshot, is how do you start to take advantage of now? I think Facebook does a really good job from an audience perspective of like, historically, what have you done in the past? What might you be interested in doing next? But it's not so much of like, what am I as Lauren doing right now on my phone, and what are likely the next set of actions that I'm going to take? Context is obviously a really great way to do that, particularly as you tie that into commerce as a whole. So I'd say every single retailer that you talk to today realizes that their app is not going to be the de facto destination app that you're always going to use, unless if you're Amazon, for example. And so what they're trying to figure out is how do I start to create these kind of like really like shopping malls that exist across mobile web and applications where people can start to discover products that are related to what they're interested in. This can apply to travel industry. This can obviously apply to brick and mortar retail, et cetera, but actually tying relevant calls to action, which is to say, you're reading about Bora Bora and Condé Nast, why not book a trip there? Why not look at hotels that are currently available there? How do we start to actually put this storefront in front of users at that exact point of intent when they're interested in taking a relevant action? As opposed to today, and we often do this obviously from a programmatic perspective, is just think about historically where have they gone and just kind of keep putting that message in front of them. So I think doing something that's much more appropriate to what they're doing at that given point in time. Also, the units itself don't make sense, right? I think we operate in this like 300 by 250, 728 by 90 standard units that we can just spray across desktop and mobile and everything's just gonna work great. Like, it doesn't work that way, and it's not a very relevant mobile experience. So how do we start to think about that format also changing? And then the resolution is critical, right? So as opposed to just dropping people into the App Store or dropping people into a mobile web experience, bringing them to the application itself where they can actually spend money, take action, et cetera, is really best for both the advertiser and publisher, and typically performs well. So we'll just kind of go through a couple examples. This is very similar to the travel example I just gave. So I'm interested in Denver, great, and I'm reading about this in Condé Nast. What are all the things I might want to do that's related? I might want to book a hotel, restaurant reservations, tickets of things that are relevant there. All of this I can do without any sort of user level information. As we talk about these walled gardens, user level information is going to be the first thing that they're not going to let people use. So what is another format that you can actually discover other relevant actions? This is just sort of like one example. And obviously in terms of the format itself, really embedding that in discovery, I think with a lot of mobile ADD type mentalities, you're seeing more of these kind of swipeable units where people can take a series of different actions and really explore what they want to do next. So I'd say key things to think about in terms of, I'd say mobile as a whole, but I'd say particularly as it pertains to like deep linking is, number one, making sure that people are able to discover things that are relevant to that specific moment in time on their device. And then obviously making sure that they're able to be resolved immediately. People don't spend a lot of time on their phone just sort of like naturally browsing. Like if they're interested in something, you want to immediately bring them to an area where they can take action. The second thing is that I'd say focus a lot more on what people are looking to do as opposed to what they've historically done in the past. As we've also talked a lot about today, as opposed to just so much of the historical audience-based information, doing something that's a little bit more timely for locationally what they're doing at that point in time, or contextually what they're reading about. These are obviously means that you can use across walled gardens throughout mobile web and native applications. And then lastly, I would just say for commerce in particular, given the fact that there is so much credit card information on file, there's so much information in general that resides within that application, resolving people into the app through deep links so that they can immediately take those purchases. And that is it. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurel. Sit down.
Let's do it.
Right. I'm interested in deep linking for a couple of reasons. Obviously, indexing on these apps is almost impossible because you can't crawl these apps.
Pain in the ass, yeah.
Yeah. So the process is you're effectively indexing these apps.
Correct.
So the process is quite, because I met with your CEO and he whiteboarded and I was sitting there going, oh my God, this seems like a very, very manual process. There's have to go to a lot of these apps. But on the basis of this, are you able then to kind of like, do contextual targeting? Is that the sort of basis for this, basically?
Yeah, so there's a few things that we do. So one, as we talk about these deep linking structures, typically, so this is in Google's best interest, everyone's best interest, where they want to in-app resolve people. So what a lot of publishers have done is they've built basically mirrors of their apps, right? So they'll have a mobile website that mirrors exactly what's in the application. You can then go through, crawl that actual mobile website, and then associate the deep linking structure within the apps. That's like optimal case scenario. If that doesn't work, and let's just say they're pure play app like Hotel Tonight, there's no mobile website. The only way that you can operate with a lot of those guys is actually through a feed. So we work with Apple, for example, we work with Amazon, we work with a series of people that are not interested in letting us crawl their properties. You can still go through taking a feed of basically all that product level information and then tie it back to those actual deep links.
And so the value to marketers and publishers, I mean, audience buying on mobile apps just seems a little bit, I don't know, it doesn't seem to work. It's always kind of a click to install metric, but this seems to be contextual from a user experience seems to be a better way of doing things. Is that, I mean, the publishers and marketers you're talking to on both sides, is that what they want, the contextual piece?
No. I mean, publishers want to get paid, number one, and advertisers want ROI. That's probably, it's no different. So I know it's shocking to all of us in the room, but no, I'd say context is honestly a really effective parameter, particularly because of the walled gardens, right? So if you don't have that user level information, IDFA data is all over the place between different applications, and oftentimes we don't have a lot of that data to bring to bear even. Context is usually a great signal. People will use everything from time of day, location, or obviously like indexing the actual product and content level information.
I mean, it seems to me if you're on Spotify and you're listening to Beyonce, you don't want to see an ad for a flashlight. You want to see tickets for Beyonce in your city. So it seems to me that is tailor-made for the user experience and plus the ability to target those users at that level.
Correct. So the interesting thing too is it actually performs, which is odd enough, right? So it's great when that actually works. So I think part of it's just like actually having very engaging units, but the contextual relevancy, a lot of people don't view it as an ad. So like Spotify, for example, is an advertiser of ours. And let's say Spin Media, for example, is a publisher of ours. Spin is talking about Drake's new album. Why not have the call to action say like, listen to this exact song in Spotify? Great. Or I can even give them the option of like Pandora or Rhapsody or whatever it is that you use for music streaming, and then immediately resolve them. Click-through rates, I'd say on average, for even like music listening are like 4%, which is obviously considerably higher than standard programmatic, let's just say.
And is this likely to be a breakout then, sort of monetization technology for publishers? I mean, that's
the plan.
That's who we really are looking at here, because we've had numerous publishers on stage today,
Sure.
and their biggest pain point is mobile, and it's a real problem. And if you've got scale, then if you could sell on a keyword basis, then they're getting paid either on a CPM or click basis. Then
Correct.
There's huge opportunity there.
Yeah, the publisher is absolutely our core constituent at URX. I mean, the three things that we aim to fix is, one, monetization is really, really hard for publishers right now. And part of it is it's very, very hyper-fragmented, but also just the effective CPMs in mobile are embarrassing. The second thing is the units are gross. They look terrible from a user experience perspective. Like, they're not relevant, they're not engaging. Figuring out a way to make it so it, quite frankly, doesn't even look like an ad. It just looks like a series of related actions. And thirdly, which we didn't really talk about today, is more of like content discovery. So I think for a lot of publishers, even if you think of Business Insider, where so much of their traffic is actually coming out of Facebook and social, that really hurts their business, quite frankly, from a monetization perspective, because of a lot of the handcuffs there.
So you think that there's a real opportunity to kind of like use use deep linking to surface content to users and drive it away, have more of a fragmented approach rather than having one big player like Google or Facebook dominating your traffic.
Correct. So the more that we can make content and commerce something that users can discover everywhere across the mobile web ecosystem and app ecosystem, the better that's going to be both for publishers and advertisers, and also less the reliance that people are going to have on Google and Facebook.
You spoke briefly about the e-commerce piece and the lack of direct sales coming from app.
Yeah.
How does that tilt this technology might be able to tilt the balance there, like?
For direct?
Yeah.
Direct in-app is interesting. So it's not something that URX does. It's something that we could obviously facilitate. I think people are interested in context, particularly in app. I think people are interested in more engaging units, because let's be honest, most of mobile monetization is performance-based today. There isn't a lot of brand engagement. But I think the more that people can actually understand the quality, the context, et cetera, in app, and through a better engaging unit, presumably they should be able to drive more direct demand.
And it's interesting you've moved obviously from a cookie-based desktop company, which was what AppNexus is primarily, but it's obviously moving into mobile now. But
sure.
Do you see the context piece outdoing audience-based buying in mobile in terms of sort of the monetization piece?
1,000%.
So that's you think that's going to be the sweet spot for publishers going forward?
I think because of the walled gardens in particular, it's going to be very difficult to have a user-based approach to ad decisioning moving forward. I think it's going to be very difficult.
Okay, Lauren, thanks for taking the time to explain
Thank
that,
you.
and I really appreciate it. So a round of applause, please, for Lauren, and we look forward to seeing more from you guys in the future.
No, you got it.
I'll go there.